Welcome to the British History Podcast wrap-up show. I'm Benjo.
And I'm Brandon.
And let's get to talking. Are we covering episode 3 here?
Season 1, episode 3. That's right. It's our second podcast. Season 1, episode 3. So Benjo, in season 1, episode 3, we skip all the way from 70,000 BCE all the way now. We're specifically...
70,000?
70,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we covered 70,000 years in the first podcast.
That's insane.
That's why the last one was so long,
Understandable.
right?
Yeah.
Most of these, hopefully, of these will be shorter than the actual
37 minutes.
Right, than the actual episode. And hopefully we'll improve our podcasting skills, lighting.
Yeah, dressing.
Dressing, yeah, it's a completely different day. We're wearing different clothes.
Remember to share this video.
So, Benjo, we go specifically to the year 56 BCE, right? Mm-hmm. And that is the year that Gaius Julius Caesar.
Oh, okay.
You heard of it?
Yes, I've heard of it. I've learned a lot about Julius Caesar, yes.
Well, that's the year that he, I guess, initially planned an invasion of Britain. Okay. So what do you know about Julius Caesar?
Well, he was obviously the Roman emperor, or the Roman ruler.
General,
yes. He was murdered by one of his friends, actually. Right. He was stabbed like 30 times.
His friend's name?
I actually don't remember.
A2.
Oh, I didn't learn.
Brutus.
Oh, Brutus.
Brutus. Yeah.
Okay, I now remember that.
He said, "You too, Brutus?"
I know. I heard. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, Benjo and I went to Italy with a big family trip last year. We learned a little bit about Julius Caesar. That's when specifically I said he was a great Roman leader. They said, make sure you know that he was a Roman general, not a Roman emperor.
Yeah.
At least at this time.
Yeah.
So anyway, he is governor of areas of Gaul, Gaul, right? At this time. And Gaul is what's mostly like France, Spain, and Germany, right? That areas. That was big. That was called Gaul, Gaul. And so he was the governor of areas in Gaul. And so, one thing is that the story of Britain deals with a lot of invasions, right?
And it does.
Right. So you had the Neanderthals, you had the early Britons, you had the Celts, and now you've got the Romans coming in, right? So, Rome. We're gonna be talking about a lot about Rome in these episodes. The Roman Empire was huge at this point. Mm-hmm. In BCE times, you had the Greek Empire, and then the Roman Empire followed after that. And the Roman Empire controlled a lot of Europe and even into Asia. And so we'll get into all that, but
it's very powerful.
It was very powerful. It was huge. It was organized. It was technologically advanced for its time.
Like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day.
That's what they say. And so, when the Roman Empire ended, a lot of technology and knowledge was lost. But anyway, so Rome was so expansive right now, but in 56 BCE, they literally considered Britain, the island of Britain, like the edge of the world. They didn't know that there was anything else further out there. And Britain was mysterious, right? Mm-hmm. And so Jamie mentions that Romans weren't especially seafaring. They didn't travel by sea a bunch. I mean, I guess they had to some extent to get around to some of their places.
Like, would they hike? Like, just walk?
Yeah. So
they use horses?
They used a lot of cavalry. Mm-hmm. And so they of course they had to be seafaring to get to England. And one reason at least they gave for invading and attempting to conquer England was because England, again I'm saying England, it's Britain, British
well,
people.
is it not in England?
Well, it's England now. England.
But not back then.
Back then,
okay. It wasn't England yet.
Back then, and it probably, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the word they used was Britain, but it wasn't England. England will come up with the Anglo-Saxons, the Anglo-land, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, people from Britain were coming onto the continent, and they were acting as mercenaries for the Gauls that were fighting the Romans. And when people were attacking the Romans and then fleeing, a lot of times they'd flee to Britain and hide out, right?
Yeah.
So that was one of their reasons for going there. It was to like root out all these people that were attacking them in different ways. And so one of the people in Gaul, like I guess it's northwest Gaul, what we call Brittany now, a culture very similar with a lot of the same people that were going back and forth across the English Channel from northern France to Britain. They had rebelled against the Roman soldiers. And so eventually Caesar turned his attention to Britain in 55 BC. So he had kind of been preparing for this invasion before, but there was bad weather and some other things. And so he waited until 55 BCE. And but at the same time, one of the reasons he was being careful was because he had to be super careful to get authorization to invade Britain, right? He couldn't just do it, because if he did and something went wrong, the people, his like superiors in Rome, would be super pissed.
Like
the Roman Senate and the emperor.
What about like the citizens? Would they be
through the leaders? Okay. Yeah, I mean, yes, it could turn bad. So he had to. Julius Caesar kind of like portrayed this whole thing as he was putting a little group together. They're going to do some reconnaissance, go over there and find out what's going on, and get some information for a potential future invasion, right? Jamie gets into some discussion again about them being at the end of the world and Roman gods and oceanic gods and all that kind of stuff. But the Romans decided on Dover to land for their recon invasion project, if you will. And so, again, I don't claim to be an expert on the geography of Britain, but Dover, I think it's a pretty close crossing in the channel, but it also has a lot of those steep cliffs. Have you ever heard of the cliffs of Dover? So they have steep cliffs. So I imagine it's probably not like the easiest harbor to get in and then get up onto land. So anyway, they go to Dover, and at the time I was somewhat a little confused. There was a British leader named Commius, right? And it sounds like he was the king of a tribe in Britain. But one thing he was looking to do was seek peace with Caesar, because I guess he maybe got word that Caesar was going to invade Britain, and he wanted to make sure there was peace and that his people were protected, right?
Yeah.
Across the channel. And so I guess for a number of years, Caesar had put him on the throne as a puppet king. You know what a puppet king is?
Like he's controlled by somebody.
Right.
I didn't know what that was. I just like
context clues.
Context clues.
Yeah. So he acts as the king of his little tribe, but if he tries to act, but he's really subservient to somebody else, right? Yeah. So he's a puppet king.
Yeah, like he's a puppet controlled by somebody.
And puppet kings are usually kind of weak. So anyway, we got an exact date here somehow. August 26, 55 BCE. Caesar set sail with 80 ships. And in those 80 ships, we can do the math here. There's 10,000 men.
10,000.
10,000 men in two Roman legions. Okay? We're going to be talking a lot about Roman legions. But what you need to know is that these Roman legions, I guess, were about 5,000 people strong. And you could have 10 Roman legions, you could have 20. And for the next, spoiler alert, for the next like 450 years, there's going to be active Roman legions throughout a lot of Britain,
Yeah.
right? And so you got 10,000 men, two legions, so 5,000 legions, and then they have 500 more cavalry.
Yeah.
All right. So the cavalry seems to be one of these themes with invasions that's going to happen with William the Conqueror later. You've got cavalry that come over, and there's a lot of work. Jamie talks about it a lot with the Norman conquest in 1066, but to bring 500 cavalry over in 55 BCE, that would have been a big.
And they're just bringing them over in one day, or
I mean, I guess it's part of the 80 ships, you know.
okay, yeah.
But to even, I mean,
Yeah,
so it's
that's
like
insane.
30 miles.
And you're gonna have to feed them to keep them.
You have to
living,
feed
survive.
them. Yeah, it's a whole thing. So these Romans come over, and they see all along the cliffs of Dover, Britons lined up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking if I'm understanding what Jamie's laying down, that they were painted blue. They're, the stereotypical blue that these Britons were painted. And so Commius hadn't really done his job, or whatever job he was looking to do, to keep the peace. Sounds like he may have been out for himself there,
Yeah,
not necessarily for I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. But the Romans had by far the advantage in military training, organization, skill, weaponry, you name it. But believe it or not, the native Britons, had chariots. You know what chariots are?
I've heard of that word before, but no, I don't.
So they're like horse-drawn carriages that you could
okay.
fight on
Now
and
that I
go
think
quick,
about it, yes.
And in my head, I think of them more as like a Roman invention.
Yeah.
But apparently they existed in Britain even before the Romans came. And so the Britons had chariots. They were better organized than, I guess, the Romans thought.
Mm-hmm.
They were braver than the Romans thought.
Yeah.
So they were willing to fight. But when you've got an amazingly organized, disciplined group like the Romans were, and you're trying to fight for survival, it's not surprising that the Britons fought more like guerrilla type warfare. You know what guerrilla? Not talking about the big great ape.
Okay, no, I think you've told me about this before, but I don't really remember. They would hide would they hide?
That's right.
Okay.
They would hide, they would fight. They wouldn't fight in open battle.
Yeah.
Guerilla, guerrilla. Yeah. And so they would like strike and move. It wasn't like lined up with the Roman legions. They had thousands of men. If one of theirs got injured or killed, they just moved the next guy in. That was their strength. Strength in numbers, strength in organization.
Yeah.
So, and of course Romans had a lot of armor too.
So like protective wear?
Right.
Okay.
And so I think sounds like what Jamie's saying, one of their mistakes landing at Dover was they landed and they had to get out into the water, I guess because the cliffs were so high, and they had to navigate going from the water to the shore with all this equipment and all this armor on, right?
Well, why did they not just land at the shore?
I guess because the cliffs were so. Maybe they could have found a better place.
Or it would have been like if they landed at the shore, they would know that they were coming.
Right. I think no matter where they went at that time, they're gonna be eyes watching them.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they had short swords. They were known to fight with the Romans. But after some drama of them coming, landing and coming in, the legions finally advanced. But it was kind of chaotic in their movement from the deeper water to the shallow water, which was better for the Britons because it was a little the Britons. It was their guerrilla-like warfare worked a little bit better with that. But the Romans eventually advanced on land. They regained the advantage. But the Britons, Jamie also refers to them as what I think the Romans would have referred to them as in Roman, whatever this word is, as barbarians.
This is another one of those words that I've heard of it, but I have no clue what it means.
Yeah, so barbarians you think of as just like uncivilized, uncouth, just almost like kind of this caveman mentality. They have no civilization, no honor, no ethics, no morals, no code, no anything, But and that's how the Romans thought of them. But again, they had chariots, so they had to have something.
Yeah.
And they had undoubtedly more technology than we would have realized. So they took off anyway. The barbarians, they took off in their chariots. They couldn't be caught. The Britons, the barbarians, they sought to negotiate, right? And a lot of times in prehistoric and dark ages, quote unquote dark ages, medieval period.
Yeah.
Medieval period's my favorite.
Is that the Renaissance?
It gets to the Renaissance, really. The medieval period is from like early 400s to like mid 1400s. So it's basically a millennium.
Oh, it's like, that's a long time.
Yeah.
So it's and I think the Renaissance starts at like 1500 and ends in like 1700.
That's
so
right.
It's literally right before the.
That's right. So you got early medieval period, mid medieval period, late medieval period. Anyway, but throughout all these periods, you're going to hear it's going to sound pretty archaic, archaic, like old and uncivilized. Again, I'm going to use that word uncivilized a lot, but they would exchange hostages in exchange for like, okay, hey, we'll agree.
Well, how would you exchange hostages? But like, you can't. How do you have a better hostage than somebody else? That would make sense.
And I'm not sure
if they're more important than
maybe. Yeah, you for hostages, you didn't just give your quote unquote unimportant people.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's important.
Yeah, but like, what people would want. Like the people would want more, just
like the nobility, the higher, the elite, So they would give
if
hostages.
somebody took the president or something.
Right. So it doesn't say that they exchanged hostages. It just says that the Britons promised hostages.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they were like, "Look, we'll behave, we'll negotiate with you. Just take it easy. You can have some hostages."
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like the Romans gave them any hostages, any Roman like important people. Because they wouldn't have been in position.
Did Romans have hostages?
So the Roman took Britain.
Okay. But did the Roman? Did they didn't give any hostages?
It doesn't sound like it. So it kind of ends. This episode ends with Commius's return, and I was a little confused as whether he was returning from the continent to Britain. Well, you can't hear in your mic if you're shaking around like that. Anyway, it sounds like maybe Commius was coming back over. I'm not sure exactly where these negotiations took place, but you
can't hear in the mic. Can you hear in your mic if you don't have a cord attached to it?
A number of tribes came and basically submitted and surrendered to the Romans, right? So we're going to end this one as it ended in 55 BCE, and we're going to move on to the next one.
All right.
So anyway,
is this one shorter than the last one?
This one is shorter. This one's shorter. We're going to keep making it more succinct. All right, I'm talking too much.
No. You're perfect. I mean, they need to know what's going on. So
yeah. So anyway,
this has been the British History Wrap-Up Show.
British History Podcast Wrap-Up Show. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Don't believe